All right, so when you think of the Cuban Missile Crisis, what comes to mind? Probably Kennedy, Khrushchev, right? A big, high-stakes staring contest. But what if I told you the real story, the moment the world actually pulled back from the brink, didn't happen in some fancy war room? It happened with a guy you've probably never even heard of. Let's get into it. So let's go back. It's October 27th, 1962. Historians call this day Black Saturday for a reason. I mean, tensions are just through the roof. A U.S. spy plane gets shot down over Cuba. The U.S. Navy throws up a blockade, they called it a quarantine line, around the entire island. You've got the world's two biggest superpowers, just eyeball to eyeball with their fingers right on the launch buttons. But here's the crazy part. The decision that stopped all-out nuclear war, it wasn't made by a president, it wasn't made by a premier. Nope, not in the White House, not in the Kremlin. It was made deep underwater. We're talking 500 feet down. Inside this cramped, sweltering Soviet submarine, the B-59, while it was being hunted by the U.S. Navy. Okay, so you really have to picture what it was like inside this submarine. It was an absolute pressure cooker. I mean, it was a nightmare. These guys were trapped. They were totally blind to what was happening in the world, and they were literally boiling. Get this, the temperature inside hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 50 Celsius. See, this sub was built for the Arctic, for icy cold water, not the warm Caribbean. So, of course, the air conditioning breaks down. And this metal tube just turns into a giant oven. And it just gets worse from there. On top of that insane heat, you've got carbon dioxide levels shooting up. You have crew members just passing out, fainting right at their stations from heat exhaustion. But here's the real kicker. They hadn't heard from Moscow in days. For all they knew, the war had already started. They were totally cut off, blind, deaf, and completely alone. So you've got this crew, exhausted, paranoid, probably hallucinating from the heat and the bad air, and that's when it happens. The U.S. Navy does something, and what they thought was just a simple signal, well, it was seen as a full-blown attack. And this right here, this is the misunderstanding that nearly destroyed everything. The Americans are dropping these little practice depth charges. To them, it's just a knock on the door, right? Hey, we see you, come on up. But imagine being inside the B-59. The whole sub is shaking, it's dark, you can't talk to anyone. You're not thinking signal, you're thinking we're under attack, World War III is happening right now, and we're the first target. And the captain, Valentin Savitsky, he completely loses it. In the middle of all this heat and chaos, he screams, "We're going to blast them now. We will die, but we will sink them all. We will not become the shame of the fleet." He was ready to go. And he ordered them to prep the sub's secret weapon, a nuclear torpedo. We're talking a torpedo with the same punch as the Hiroshima bomb. But, and this is a huge but, Savitsky couldn't just fire on his own. There was a rule. Kind of a fluke, really. A special protocol just for this mission. And because of that rule, the fate of the entire planet rested on the shoulders of one man, Vasili Arkhipov. It was called the Three-Signature Protocol. See, normally on a Soviet sub, you just needed two guys to agree to launch a nuke, the captain and the political officer. But Arkhipov, he was the chief of staff for the whole submarine flotilla, and by pure chance, he was riding along on the B-59 for this mission. His presence added a third lock to the system. All three had to agree, unanimously. So back in that hellishly hot control room, Captain Savitsky says, yes, fire. The political officer, he says, yes, too. That's 2 for 2. 2 out of the 3 approvals needed. The order is almost a go. So who was left? Who could possibly stop them now? This is where Vasili Arkhipov steps in. And this is what made him the right guy at the right time. While everyone else is panicking, he keeps a cool head. He starts arguing, look, if they were really trying to sink us, they wouldn't be using these little things. This has to be a signal. But it wasn't just that he was logical. The man had a reputation. Just the year before, he'd been a hero on the K-19 submarine, preventing a nuclear meltdown and getting a massive dose of radiation in the process. The crew, they trusted him. He had this incredible moral authority. And he used all of it, his calm, his logic, his reputation, to talk the captain down. He said no, and he convinced them to surface. So the B-59 surfaces. The Americans see them, the whole situation de-escalates, and the world just keeps on spinning with no idea how close it came. But here's the tragic part. When Arkhipov and his crew finally get back home, are they treated like heroes? No way. They're treated like cowards, like failures.
Can you even imagine that? You literally save the world. And what do you get? A Soviet admiral tells them to their faces, "It would have been better if you'd gone down with your ship." Just unbelievable. Their story was completely buried. Everyone involved was sworn to secrecy.
And that's how it stayed for decades. It wasn't until 40 years later, in 2002, when all these secret files finally came out, that we learned the truth. And a historian, Thomas Blanton, put it best. He just said, "A guy called Vasili Arkhipov saved the world." And finally, we all knew his name. Okay, so this is a wild story from the Cold War, right? But why are we talking about it now? What does it have to do with us? Well, it turns out it holds a massively important lesson for our own time, especially with all our high-tech, high-speed gadgets. Think about it. You had extreme stress, bad information, total sensory overload. And in the middle of all that chaos, the one thing that saved everybody was one person's calm, human judgment. Arkipov's decision to doubt, to question the situation, was more important than any military rulebook. And as we race to build things like AI-driven weapons and automated defense systems, his story is maybe the best argument I've ever heard for always keeping a human in the loop. Arkhipov wasn't being a political hero. He was just being a rational human being in a room that was both literally and figuratively on fire. And that leaves us with a really big question for today, for 2026. As we face our own crises, we have to ask ourselves, do we have enough people like Vasili Arkhipov in the rooms where it counts? Do we have someone with the guts and the calm to say no when everyone else is screaming yes?